Hello, yes, a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you at the end of week 2 of the 2025 NFL season. Every team has now played 2 games. Obviously, because week 2 teams don't get bye weeks that early, and yeah, it's things are shaping up pretty nicely. I know it is only week 2. I know we haven't even got past the middle of September, or is today the middle of September? Either way, we haven't even got to the end of September, and it's already feeling like you can kind of get a sense of some teams and where they're going to be going. But again, as I said last week, I'm not going to overreact. And when I get to my roundup, I'm going to give a couple more reasons why I'm not, again, personally, not going to overreact when it comes to a couple of teams either. But before we get into that, we need to do the simple task, which is the admin and me thanking you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you are new, you can like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And I don't think I mentioned this enough. If you're listening to this, well, I say if you are listening, you're only listening to this on YouTube because we changed how things are. Feel free to leave comments. Feel free to ask questions. Tell me where I'm wrong and where I'm right. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of wrong. But yeah, feel free to comment along on the video and feel free to take part in the debate that we're having. So feel free to do that. And then don't forget, if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for your continued support of this little podcast that we are doing. Right, and with that being said, let's get on with the show. Now, I always start, or at least try to start with my two topics as two big off-field news, league business and all that sort of stuff. But there were just two stories this week that sort of revolve around on the pitch, on the field matters that I just couldn't not help but lead the show with these. And I suppose the big starting point is the big injury news that came out over the weekend, and that is Joe Burrow, who suffered from turf toe. And I'll be honest, I still don't know what turf toe is. I've looked into it. I've heard a couple of people talk about exactly what turf toe. I just can't imagine the situation, like the pain and exactly what it does when you step on your foot. I just can't picture it. But anyway, it is turf toe, and he is said to be out, according to the various reports, for 3 months. Now, this isn't going to be a debate about or a talk about what the Bengals should do. Should they stick with their backup Jake Browning, or should they go and make a trade? Although, if I'm being brutally honest, I think you go out and make a trade for someone like Kirk Cousins at this point. But anyway, that's not the debate we're having. My thoughts surround Joe Burrow, and I put this out on social media. I think there is. I'm not saying there's a legitimate chance. I'm not saying there's a chance of this happening. But if I were Joe Burrow, before I come back, I would make a serious request to Bengals management to either trade him or threaten to retire until you do something to sort out this offensive line. Because there is just no way that someone like Joe Burrow, incredible talent like Joe Burrow, should be being treated the way he is being treated by the Cincinnati Bengals and the sheer ineptitude of them to not take care of his offensive line, to take care of him. I'm pretty sure you've seen the meme. I think I'm assuming it came out around the time of the draft when the draft was happening, but it was a meme of Joe Burrow as the quarterback, Penei Sewell, the now all pro, I'm pretty sure he's all pro, tackle for the Detroit Lions, and then Joe Burrow throwing a pass to anyone wasn't a meme, but Penei Sewell is protecting him. And instead, then you go down to the bottom of the meme, and it's Joe Burrow being put under enormous pressure by anyone, because anyone playing offensive line, and throwing the ball to Jamar Chase. I think that is absolutely true. I think the way the Bengals have gone about this with paying Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, not that they don't deserve to be paid, and T. Higgins as well, not that they deserve to be paid, but you cannot put all of your investment or focus so much of your time on the weapons if there is no one there to protect those weapons. And when I was thinking about the Andrew Luck situation. He basically said, "My body is too broken to do this." And Joe Burrow cannot use this as a precedent. If you are not going to protect Joe Burrow on a regular basis, this is now his third major injury since he has come into the league. How much more of this can he sustain? If indeed he can sustain it. We saw with Andrew Luck. He said, "Nope, my body's too beaten up. I'm not doing this anymore." I think Joe Burrow has every right to have a bigger say on his future and demand better for his future. If that means going to a team that has the resources to actually protect him, or if he, retires, then just takes a year out and then, reassesses things and, signs as a free agent. I don't know how it will work with his rights or whatever. Some team may have to trade for him, but make a move to actually protect yourself. I think he's well within his rights at this stage. So if the Bengals aren't going to make serious moves, again, but Burrow walks up to them tomorrow and says, do this, or or I'm being traded, or I'll demand a trade, or I'll threaten to retire. Go out and trade for an offensive lineman, or something has to be done to protect what is the arguably I don't know fully about the Bengals' entire history, but I think we can comfortably say the best quarterback that franchise has ever had. You have to do everything you can to protect that asset. And the Bengals just simply are not doing that. Again, you can forgive them one, you could even forgive them two if they happened so far apart. If they were 7, 8 years apart that he got major injuries as a result of this, you could maybe, chalk that up to whatever. That's just football. But to have this many in such a short space of time, and I'm pretty sure there are other, minor ones that have happened along the way. I'm sure he must have been taken out of games or missed drives or whatever because he's got a bit of a bad, taken a bit of a bad hit. In fact, I know that he had it happen against the Steelers yesterday because I was, 'cause I was there for that their final game of the season. So it is always there as a possibility. But if they're not going to do anything, then why should he bother to? Why should he bother to try and stick it out with them? You may see it as a little bit extreme, but in all honesty, I don't think that Joe Burrow really has much of a choice at this stage of his career, in order to protect the rest of his career. So that would just be me. Let me guys know what you think. Now, the other bit of news, again, supposedly off the field news that caught my eye over the weekend came from Adam Schefter of ESPN, and his reports that Shedeur Sanders, quarterback now of the Cleveland Browns, was going to be drafted by the Baltimore Ravens, but he said no because he didn't want to be drafted and then play behind Lamar Jackson. Now, to an extent, I get where Shedeur Sanders might be coming. I can see the angle that he is going for, because there was no way that he was going to play under Lamar Jackson or behind Lamar Jackson unless Lamar Jackson got injured, and maybe he thought that wasn't going to happen. So why would I want to draft? Especially, he felt that he was number one quarterback in the draft. He felt he should have been gone, a lot higher than he did. So I understand why. Once he's labeled as a backup, then he's going to be a backup forever. And it's not as if it was a situation where Lamar Jackson is an older quarterback. It's not like Will Howard with the Steelers, for instance. Yes, they got Aaron Rodgers, or maybe he was told that they were going to get Aaron Rodgers. We'll bring you in as a draft pick. He's only going to be around 1 year, so you can learn developing it, and then you'll get a fair shot next year. It wasn't like that. Lamar Jackson still has a good 5, 6 years, minimum, I would say, in him in the league. So is Shedeur Sanders willing to wait another 5, 6 years? But just not going to happen. It's I don't think that's going to happen. But at the same time, I think he missed an incredible trick by not going behind Lamar Jackson. Because let's say he did. Let's say he said, "Okay, I'm gonna go to the Baltimore Ravens. I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna learn behind Lamar. I'm gonna be given a couple of times, a couple of plays in the preseason. If I learn something from Lamar Jackson, you know, whether it's his ability to read the game or his ability, maybe Lamar Jackson showed him how to sidestep players better because, Shador can feel like he does it, but there's a difference between Lamar Jackson doing it. So if he can learn that from him, then that's great. And then in the preseason games, he would show, right, this is what this, to show the league, this is what I'm capable of. Then what happens is when these quarterbacks get injured, which we'll be talking about later, when he's quarterback, who is front and center in everybody's mind? He's already got the personal hype train on his side with all the media attention, so he's already in most people's immediate sphere of focus. But then you've actually got tape on him, and he's playing in a system where you'd think, with his skill set, he'd be able to flourish a bit and look a little bit better. So I think Shedeur Sanders took a huge, huge misstep. Not to to physically say the Ravens are going to draft, but then to say no to the Ravens, I think is ridiculous. And let's be honest as well. I say that Lamar Jackson's health. We've seen, a couple of years ago, he got injured in December twice. In back to back December seasons, or back to back seasons in December. There we go. Let's get the wording right. So there is always the possibility that he could be injured down the stretch again with his style of play. Then who's ready? Shedeur Sanders. Then he gets to show what he can do in a normal, in a regular setting. Or when Lamar Jackson is pulled out of the game, say because they're winning so comfortably. There would have been plenty of, or at least could have been plenty of opportunities for him to showcase himself in a system that I think would have benefited him quite well. So I think Shedeur Sanders made a huge misstep there, and whether or not he's ever going to get the chance to prove himself again, we don't know. Maybe it'll be this season, but the way he's down at the depth chart, it's going to be perhaps a bit of a long shot. But even so, I just think there is something to be said. And I've said before, I'm okay with players having some level of control over their destiny, especially when it comes to the draft, because I've never seen it make sense that that's the one time of year that you can effectively not pick where you go. High school, even though it's based on your school district, you can move. You can always move. If you're a good enough player and you think you can always maybe convince your parents to move to a better school district or to a better school to get a better opportunity. College, again, so long as they want you, you get to choose where you want to go. Free agency, again, so long as the team wants you, you get to choose where you want to go. When it comes to the draft, you get absolutely no say. I don't think it's right that you have that just at that one point that it's taken completely out of the player's control. So I do think the players should be allowed to push back. But for him not to choose the Ravens, I think was a major, major mistake on his part. And, whether or not this is going to be something that impacts him and, sets his career back 5 years or whatever because he's with the Browns, and we know the Browns aren't exactly the best at developing and making their quarterbacks work. We don't know, but I think at this moment in time, that was I think he's messed up majorly in this situation. Now, as I hinted at in that previous segment, quarterbacks do get injured, and we've had a couple of high-profile quarterback injuries over this past weekend. Obviously, you know what my thoughts are on the Joe Burrow situation, as I touched on them earlier. The other one would be Justin Fields with a concussion, obviously quarterback in the New York Jets. I'm not too sure what exactly to say about this because the Jets weren't going anywhere anyway. So I think it's sad for Justin Fields if he's in concussion protocol, and we don't know again how this is long as it's going to last. Could it be could he be back within the week? He's in concussion protocol. Could he miss this week? Could he be back in 2 weeks? We don't know, but either way, it doesn't really impact the Jets too much. But I cannot say the same about JJ McCarthy of the Minnesota Vikings, who, according to reports, is said to be out for anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. Now, I think this is big because whilst it's not a big injury like Joe Burrow's is, given the way the NFC North is set, or could well be set, and the wild card play, these 2 to 4 weeks could very well dictate the Minnesota Vikings season. If you're if you're someone who had them maybe competing with the Lions and the Packers at the top of the NFC North, how many, lose 1 or 2 games, all of a sudden that's 1 or 2 games lost at the top of the NFC North. This could in theory cost them division title if you think they're maybe a little bit further behind that and you want to put them in the wild card races, challenging with the likes of maybe the Commanders. If you think the Eagles are going to win the NFC East, comparing with the maybe the West, if you think the Seahawks or the Rams are going to be good this season and you think the 49ers are going to win the division, they're going to be competing with them. And again, whoever doesn't win the NFC North out of the Lions or the Packers, I don't think it's going to be the Bears, to fight for a wild card spot as well. So this is crucial. I think the way they handle these next 2 to 4 weeks could very well dictate what the Minnesota Vikings look like towards the end of the season. So, with those big stories out the way, let's get into our roundup of, again, not every single game, but just some of the games that really caught my eye and I felt like need some attention. So, just for example, the Ravens beating the Browns by the scoreline they did. I don't think anyone really is concerned or surprised or shocked. That result was always likely going to happen, so we just move past that. So, just again, I don't touch on every single score. But we will start off with the Bears and the Lions, and I'm going to use this game as the example of it is still far too early for us to be overreacting or making big projections for how teams are moving, moving forward and what the state of them are. Because how many people thought after the Lions lost to the Packers that no, this is that no, the Lions team is over. They've lost their two coordinators. Clearly, they're not the same team. This team is going to take a step back, and then they go and roll over the Bears, which admittedly the Bears are still the Bears, but they still show that at least they can put up points and still put in big performances. So it's not totally saying that the Lions are back or that last week was a fluke or whatever, but it just still goes to show let's wait a little bit more time before we start to decide exactly where teams stand. Is still going to take a little bit of time. Then we move on to the big game of the week, the biggest game of the week, America's game of the week, as Fox advertised it, the Super Bowl rematch between the Eagles and the Chiefs. And again, to point off on the thing, I'm not going to say that the Chiefs dynasty is officially over at this point. Yes, there are some struggles, but you have to look at it and say, hey, what was the score in the Super Bowl? They managed to get it to within, a much smaller margin. And when you look at, the Travis Kelsey dropped interception, that's 7 points taken off the ball for the Chiefs, then seven because they went down and scored the other way. 7 points on the ball for the Eagles, 14-point swing. Then you can effectively reverse the result and give the Chiefs the win and the Eagles the loss. So yeah, I don't think it's there yet. Again, they've still got Rasheed Rice to come back. They've still got Xavier Word to come back when he's back from injury. There are still positives to be taken from the Kansas City Chiefs, even if they are 0-2. This is a team that's effectively built for the postseason. So even if they have to sneak in as a wild card seed, maybe they win the last three games, get the momentum, and then they're good for the playoffs. I think they'll be okay. Especially after, the past couple of years, or no, 2 years ago, when they went to Baltimore and won the AFC Championship, showing that they don't have to rely on winning in Arrowhead to get results. So I just think not really that much of a situation. I'm still not worried about the Kansas City Chiefs just yet. But before we move on, another point I want to make on the tush push. Honestly, I'm tired of talking about it, but given the discourse has come out this past weekend, feels like we are going to be seeing the end of it. I don't like it because I think the tush push. I have no issue with it. I'm of the mindset of if you want to stop it, rather than trying to get it banned or outlawed. But the way the comments came out, it is an unofficialable. They can't officiate the play, is what I'm trying to say, because there's so many moving parts, all the accusations of false starts and whatever, and whether or not the linemen line up offside of the ball. It just seems too hard. I think they are going to use that as the excuse that in the next off season, I think it is going to be bad because it's just far too complicated for them to officiate. I think that is what's going to be because they can't use the injury data because that hasn't come out to say that the play is inherently more dangerous than anything else. And if they're going to do it, I think that's the way they are going to go about it. Again, I don't like it. I'm okay with the tush push, but it seems like no, it's not necessarily the NFL, but the NFL teams are going to look for any way they can to try and get rid of this play, even though it is just a play that works well for the Eagles. So it's just going to be taken out at the end of this year. If they can't do it through that reason, they'll find another reason. I think this is going to be the end of the tush push. Moving on, and it seems as if we may have a quarterback controversy in San Francisco after Mac Jones, stepping in for the injured Brock Purdy, put on what I think people can say was a relatively good performance. It wasn't superstar, wasn't stellar, but going 26 to 39 for 279 yards, a passer rating of 113, three touchdowns. I think that's pretty good for Mac Jones to be, the backup of Brock Purdy. And there are some people that say that Brock Purdy didn't necessarily justify his contract. I was certainly one of those people. I don't think you could pay him a top of the market pay for his role within the team. He's not exactly the leader. He's just a part of many with so many weapons that he's got. But it is going to be very interesting to see how things go out. Because if Mac Jones continues to play like this whilst Brock Purdy is injured, there is going to be some controversy. Because again, everyone knows the story that it was Kyle Shanahan wanted Mac Jones when he came out, but he knew he was never going to get him. Maybe there was a talk they were going to trade up in the first round to get him. He wanted Mac Jones, so he's got the man that he's been wanting for so long, and now he's again making it work. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Mac Jones keeps going the way he does, whether or not Brock Purdy gets his job back. And again, the 49ers as a franchise have history in this. Alex Smith got injured. Colin Kaepernick came in and did pretty well, and then Alex Smith basically never played for the 49ers again. So it's not out of the realms of possibility that maybe they maybe they have some issues moving forward. Let's just put it that way. Moving on, we have the Indianapolis Colts with a big win over the Denver Broncos. Again, I'm not going to overreact or say, okay, I was totally wrong. But I'm starting to have my thoughts turn around that, okay, maybe the Colts can be something. And maybe the decision to go with Daniel Jones wasn't necessarily punting on the season as I thought. It does spell a bit of trouble for Anthony Richardson because if things keep going the way they are, he's not getting his job back. So what are they going to do there? But if Daniel Jones is having his career resurrection, as it were, in Indianapolis, then good for him. But again, it just means there's a little bit of controversy. What are they going to do if he keeps playing the way that he does? And then what are they going to do with the guy that was going to be the franchise quarterback in Anthony Richardson? It just leaves them in a bit of an odd space. And then finally, in the roundup, the Miami Dolphins. This is only going one way. Again, not trying to overreact, but you can see that there is some frustration, again, particularly with Mike McDaniels, the head coach. Tua Tagovailoa as well. Tyreek Hill was fuming on the sideline. There's talks that he could be traded out of the team. It's going to be, I think it's a case of when, not if, the Miami Dolphins decide to move on from Mike McDaniels. Is it going to be earlier in the season, or is it going to be, are they going to maybe give him a little bit longer to try and work it out? I think he's going to be gone by Thanksgiving, if I'm being brutally honest, and probably even quicker if they keep playing the way that they have been in these first 2 weeks. And then, Thursday Night Football, they've got the Bills. You would think they're going to go to 0-3. Then you have to wonder, the clock's got to be ticking in that sense. And before we go, as always, we like to do a story that's away from the world of the NFL. And this one, I think it was last week I had the personal story because I was talking about the non-player debate with Ryan Clark. This one's, again, a little bit personal. So the soccer team that I support back in the UK, Fulham, we were recently playing our local rivals, a team called Chelsea. And one of our players, Josh King, scored a goal. However, it was brought back by the video assistant replay, VAR, it's known as. It's a bit like the replay official. Basically, it's the same sort of thing. A touchdown was, like in the NFL, a touchdown scored, but they found infringement earlier on and they decided, they chalked it off. However, because everyone, pundits, analysts, even referees have said that they got the decision wrong because there was a foul in the build-up to the goal. Josh King goes and scores a brilliant goal, but there was a foul in the build-up, so they brought it back and ruled the goal out. However, because everyone said that the decision was wrong, Fulham decided to put it up for their Goal of the Month competition. Sounds pretty simple. All the goals we score, or at least the best goals we score, everyone goes and votes on which they think was the best goal of the month. By a huge margin, I think it was 81% in the end, that goal went and won Goal of the Month, even though it wasn't scored. Now, it was sort of done as a protest vote, but I still think it's quite funny that technically, when the annals of history are written, the August 2025 Goal of the Month was not even a goal. So I just think that's pretty funny. But that is the end of the show. I want to thank you, as always, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you are new, if you stumbled upon us, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to leave comments to join the debate. And if you are returning, as always, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to also check us out on our socials. I think I plugged them at the start, but I can't remember. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And we are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So feel free to go give those likes and follows as well. That is it. I shall hopefully speak to you next week, and hopefully there'll be plenty more interesting topics to discuss. So until next time, take care, and as always, stay safe.